All right, we're back in the recovery room. I'll be joined by our guest, Emily Bonds, on this episode of the Scho-Zone. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scho-Zone. I am your host, Ryan Schofield. We are in the DeGen here. We're going to try to clean it up. We're going to try to class it up here. We've got a lady in the house today. We're going to be doing the recovery room as we kind of go on, and I'm going to explain that to Emily what it is and how we got her here. So we'll also use our most friendly introduction. So Emily Bonds, welcome to the Scho-Zone.
Hi, how are you?
Doing very, very well. You know, we were just discussing the miserable weather that we're experiencing all across America right now. This is being recorded now, but we're doing this on Wednesday afternoon where it was single degrees and below zero at one point today in New York. And I understand you're dealing with a storm in Texas.
Yeah, we had snow and we had enough to build little snowmen. And we don't have anything on the ground now, but they went ahead and canceled school for today anyway. So I have a 9-year-old I'm trying to keep from turning into an iPad kid. So we'll see if that happens.
I will say I am at least glad about that part because as a child growing up in upstate New York, I will tell you there's not one of the more glamorous experiences than the snow day experience. Now, you know, like us finding this out now, we were talking about how, you know, different parts of the country handle the weather differently than others. And one thing is that you probably don't have where the kids have snow day activities that we would have in the Northeast. Like, I doubt that they own sleighs and snow tubes ready to use at their disposal. That was always the fun part about the snow day, is getting to sleep in a little bit later and then kind of going to meet up with the.
And my 3-year-old had never seen snow before. So we tried to get him to put on gloves so he can make snowballs or whatever. And he goes, Mommy, don't need it. Don't need it. And then he came back inside and he goes, Mommy, my hand's on fire. I'm like, it is on fire because it's cold, honey. And so we finally got him to wear gloves, but he was very adamant that he did not need gloves. So hopefully the next time it snows here, which will be like 7 years from now, probably, because we're in Houston, we don't get a lot of this. Hopefully he remembers that snow will catch your hands on fire.
The 7-year storm. Yeah, I deal with that myself. Of that, again, I grew up in the Northeast here, and my girlfriend grew up in Kenya. So, and she's only been here for a few years. So, like the other night, we have this storm, and like I just had to take an extra 15 minutes to drive home from work or whatever. And she's like, "Oh my God, baby, it's so beautiful." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been over this for about 20 years now," like kind of thing. I've been here my entire life, but. Anyways, snow in Texas, or as we're joking around, that the idea that I am hosting something called the Recovery Room, as I'm calling it, my show is called the Scho-Zone, and I've just it organically happened. I'm going to be starting a series of episodes called the Recovery Room, where as I'm talking to more and more people as I get older in my life, I'm finding that there are more and more people that have overcome addiction than we would kind of let on, is kind of how it's going on. Or it's that, I haven't necessarily sought these out. I mean, seeing the post that we have is how I came in contact with you, which, by the way, I need to pull up the screenshot of the post here we can talk about. And I mean, Emily, you have no shame about it. The way that you've written them out there, I read a few posts of theirs that you kind of lean into who you were or whatever. So I got to get this one here because instantly got my attention where, hopefully you're not this far along, or maybe you're just a really good writer. But my name is Emily Bonds, and on January 8th, 2021, I woke up with my hair frozen by my own vomit to the bathroom floor in a fancy hotel room. I'd gotten the most drunk I'd ever gotten. A little voice that I know was God asked me if I was done drinking. I said yes, and if he helped me, I would help other people stop drinking too. I've done a lot of crazy things in these last 4 years, like try out my hand at married ladies' beauty pageants. If you need help, and then that's how we got there. But you've painted quite the picture. Now, I responded to it, and this is the first time I've ever done a show where I'm actually initially getting acquainted as I do the show here. Okay. We did chat briefly before we got on air here, but I replied, been there, done that. I have not literally had it to that magnitude, but I definitely have had that wake up. And I wouldn't say mine was a literal come to Jesus moment, but figurative, the guns, come to Jesus moments. So I guess I want to ask how you got there, where it all kind of started, or, because when I looked at your websites, and you were somebody that seemed like you were doing this all in secrecy.
Oh yeah, because when you are in active addiction and you are someone that lives in an affluent suburb and you have a high-powered job, you don't talk about your problems. You don't talk about your feelings. I was a avid church volunteer. I was greeting people at the door to come into our church. I go to Second Baptist, which is Second Baptist here in Houston, which is top 50 largest churches in America. So I was literally greeting people while hungover, but nobody knew I was hungover. So yeah, very, very good at hiding my problems. But I got to thinking about like when should someone have said something about, girl, you might have a problem with maybe going a little too hard. And when I was a kid, I used to literally eat Bluebell ice cream. Don't know if you've had the chance, Ryan, to have Bluebell ice cream.
Bluebell ice cream?
Bluebell, yeah, it's made here in Texas, made in Brno, right up the road. They have like it's a Texas thing.
Okay,
But
yeah, I can always appreciate local fare.
oh yeah, it's a very Texas thing. But my parents used when it was on sale because it was expensive and we didn't have a lot of money. I used to eat almost a half, like you buy the ice cream in the half gallon because it's Texas, everything's bigger and better. I used to eat like an entire half gallon. I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and as an 8-year-old eat the entire thing. That's not normal. That's not
No,
normal.
and yeah, I mean, I actually, it's funny you mentioned this, is that I kind of was just talking with somebody before this about getting on a show of that. I feel like that food, and especially when it doesn't surprise me hearing a junk food, but that kind of almost builds up that kind of addictive behavior, I would
Yeah.
almost say, because there's junk in that stuff, and there are some toxins that are in there, that are the things that kind of release dopamine receptors in there. And then when we
Mhm.
start using substances of some form, we also hit that same part of the brain, and it kind of gives us that same reaction to there, where it's like, like we
Right.
all, as kids, are basically sugar junkies. And then it's just a
Mhm.
matter of what we transfer, that over to. Is that, you usually notice a pretty good correlation of people that eat well as far as how they handle other portions of things. I
Right.
would kind of, at least that's just my own assessment on there. But so we got the idea that you like the ice cream as a kid. Now,
Yeah.
I guess I always go on like, what kind of child would you say yourself? Were you an academic type? Were you an athlete? Or, these are all these little things I want to
Right.
kind of hear, of hearing how people got to where they got to.
I was the firstborn of very young parents. My parents were, I think they'd been married for 8 weeks and found out they were 6 weeks pregnant at 22 years old. So I was the honeymoon baby, literally. Um,
I have a
I was.
similar thing of that, my parents, at least I came from a similar circumstance of that, my feel like that, grew up in a very Catholic area, and
Mhm.
they were married in the summertime and started and had their firstborn in November. So kind of, the idea of
Mhm.
not quite a shotgun, but kind of sort of along those lines there. But
Yeah.
so you grew up in a really, I mean, from what I understand, I've never actually been to Texas. That's part of my thing. I did need to make my way
Right.
down there. Actually, I'm actually, one of the new things I've kind of done with my new activities of life is I'm trying to see every Major League Baseball stadium. So I do need to make myself down to
Oh, come to
Houston.
Minute Maid. Come to Minute
Yes,
Maid.
well,
It's
and I'm
enclosed and you won't sweat so much. It's awesome.
yes, that's I definitely am looking forward to that. And I'm somebody that probably should, make sure I get this correct when I go down there, but I'm that old guy that's stuck in the past so much that I actually accidentally still call it Enron from time to time, which I'd imagine is
Oh
probably
yeah,
frowned
we don't
upon
talk
down there.
about that here in Houston. We don't talk about Enron.
But I am a huge apologist, I will say, for the I don't crucify literally, or figuratively, the Astros for what happened in 2017.
Yeah, we don't talk about that either.
Right, no, but I would say that, hey, like, I'm like, like, I'm realistic to know that you just got caught, other people were doing it, or
Right.
like I kind of, I'm somebody that, I'm not sure if you're huge, are you a baseball fan as well? Or I mean, I feel like that
So
in
I
Texas, a casual sports fan is probably a hardcore
right.
sports fan by New York
I
standards.
I know that the Astros exist. I've
Okay.
been to a couple of games. But fun fact, I actually grew up closer to Dallas. I grew up
Okay.
100 miles from Dallas, so I was always a Rangers fan. So when the Rangers won, I might have had like because to get to the World Series, they had to beat the Astros. And I might have had my I had an Astro shirt on, like externally, but internally I might have had a throwback Ranger shirt on because they're close to my heart. But when you grow up a Texas Rangers fan, it's either real hot or real cold. We were real good for a while when we had I think his name was Josh Hamilton. Yeah.
Yes, Josh Hamilton.
Like
Yes.
we were real hot. We almost won the World Series. You know, we were doing really good, and then we were really bad, and then we won the World Series that one time. And that's all you need to do in Dallas is just win it once, and you're fine. The Mavs, they won it once, you're fine. Now the Cowboys, they won it a couple more times, but my siblings weren't even born yet, so I don't really know if it matters. But according to Jerry, it counts. So
Yeah, it's, well, so ironically, here's the thing with that is that when the Rangers almost won the World Series, they lost to the little backdrop here is the St. Louis
right.
Cardinals. That's my favorite
Yes.
team.
Yes.
But I will say that when I was growing up, I was a very big Buffalo Bills fan. And those losses to the Cowboys, maybe that's where the trauma started for me, I guess. I don't know, like I do remember the 52-17 Super Bowl. The thing about that one is the Bills scored the first touchdown in that game. And then the following year, losing the Super Bowl, they were actually winning at halftime and then ended up getting throttled yet again. So I carried that one as that, I'm someone who played a lot of sports growing up, but I've never been a part of I played football for a team that won championships and was undefeated. And then the rest of my life, I played for teams that struggled to win games. And I will say that it's truly a character building experience, but I feel like that may have been some of my trauma to an extent because I do it's one of those things of that when I'm on the field, I was a fierce competitor. And I mean, I'm even still that way right now. Like I play beer league softball, which is a fun time as a sober guy, but I care while I'm on the field. But as soon as I get off the field, it all just goes away. And I tell anybody, I'm like, going, if anything affects me for more than 5 seconds, please tell me to never come back.
Right. Well, I grew up playing basketball like year round. You hear about the AAU girls and they're playing year round. I started playing year round in the 5th grade all the way up until my junior year of high school. And then of course, when you're a senior, there's no point to play in the summer because you're not going to college to play basketball. But I was point guard, and in basketball, most of the time the point guards, they get back to play defense if you miss a shot, so that way you have someone back there. I was so mean, and I was mean. I was literally mean, and I played dirty. I will admit it. I was a dirty girl. They would have me go in and rebound against the post players because I could jump, and I was just mean. Like I didn't care. I was going to go for it. I was going to get the ball and get out of my way. I'm only 5'5", but don't mess with me. And what's crazy is I have a 9-year-old and his sport is rock climbing. And he does swimming, but he has no ounce of competitiveness in him at all. He is just very laissez-faire and yeah, it's great. I climbed that route. Isn't that cool? Okay, let's go hang out. Like he is not at all like me. And his dad, my husband, his dad, he was a top 100 tennis player here in Texas in high school, which Texas high school tennis, very competitive. So like USTA, everything bigger, better, more competitive, play harder. Yeah, it's very, very much a go, go, go. But our oldest, he just does not care. He wants to climb his rocks like at the gym, and he wants to code. That's all he cares about. And I don't know. I know he's my child because he looks exactly like his father, but I don't know where. I don't know what happened with him.
I kind of feel like that this has been one of the. So I'm born in 1980. And Emily, are you?
I'm in 87.
You're 87. Okay, I'm 85. So I'm turning 40 this year, and I feel like that there's been such a drastic change somewhere through the midway point of our lives of that. It's like I constantly look at it as that I was raised to grow up in one generation, and then now I have to live in another generation that is completely different. And it's how do I adapt to all of this? Because to an extent where I kind of feel like that, Yes, like, I mean, I had that same thing when you were talking about your way that you played sports, and then you said, "I'm only 5'5". I'm a guy, I'm only 5'7", so we're probably, in the same we're smaller than our counterparts, we were playing. And I was a lacrosse player, which I was
Oh,
kind of that same way, as that I had both sides of this. I was bigger than everybody growing up, and then I stopped growing and then just became this little
oh,
guy or whatever. But that
oh,
became the whole thing of like this little man syndrome, which I got out like I thank God for sports being a part of my teen years, because you have all of this confusion and sort of anger for the world, and it's such a
mm,
productive outlet where it's like, hey, given like almost the challenge of it is that how can I be as physical as possible without breaking the rules, was the way I was looking at things, because it's just like, get it out in that healthy, productive way. And it's like, I almost think of kids as like dogs, is that, they say that dogs that are well exercised tend to be more well behaved. And I truly believe
right.
that there's kind of something to that for ourselves, as far as, getting that competitive angst out. But yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot where I started that point
Did
off.
you did you do anything else? Like I did sports and I was also in like basically the Texas version of academic decathlon because I was trying to be the perfect like oldest daughter, oldest child.
Oh
So
yes,
I
that's
did so I did basketball and I did like I went to state in academics in they call it prose interpretation. It's basically you read a story very dramatically and apparently I was the best at it in Texas and got to go state. And my parents were very proud of that. Told all their friends about their smart daughter. Um, but it's real funny because like I just wanted to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sibling, the perfect everything because my parents put a lot of time and really a lot of money in me. We didn't have a lot, especially at the beginning of my life. So I felt a lot of pressure to be the best, the best ball handler in basketball, getting the best grades in algebra, being the most dramatic in the one act play. I never got to be the lead role though, little violin. But,
and
I think that also eventually played into why I was so great at partying so hard in college because I had to be the best at that too.
it's yes, we are. We're kind of cut from the same. We're very very similar in that one. As I was just thinking, that's where my point kind of started, is that we were rated this like hard nosed competitive kind of like, and now it is kind of been softened up. But hey, it's just the game towards that. But yes, no, like
Right.
to an extent, like I mostly participated in sports. But like, I mean, me and my buddies would just play pickup sports. But there was also this idea too of that even just in the banter that goes on amongst guys, being able to come up with the best insult is kind
Oh
of
yeah.
almost a form of intelligence of its own. Like people would be competitive about academics, even to that kind of extent, where
Mhm.
now it's kind of like, I don't know, like, there was like, it's like you wanted people to know that you were smart, but you didn't want your grades to be too good because then you might look nerdy
Right.
kind of thing. Like, it's like all this kind of like,
Oh yeah.
cover kind of thing. But yeah, no, I definitely feel like that we did kind of have that like pride and even the academics well too. But yeah, I just kind of feel like that competitive nature, like the softer thing of that, like I don't know what the coaching scenario scene is like there, but like I think of the coaches that I had as a child, and I
Instinct.
now realize that most of them would be locked behind bars in present day if they were to coach
Oh
that
yeah.
way. But in the same sense, I thank them for being the way that they are. So it's kind of like, you know, yeah, I can understand it's not for every child, but like for this child, it worked, like,
Oh yeah. Well, here in
um,
Texas, because sports are so, I feel like they're just so big because that's just how Texas is. Sports are just everything, and especially out here in the suburbs. I live in Houston, but I live in a suburb. It's called Katy. Katy is known for being the best at all the sports. And I don't have, high school, junior high age kids yet, but the pressure that some of these parents put on their kids playing t-ball or their 5-year-olds playing soccer, it's unreal to me. Like there's no such, and I don't know if there's a, Dave Ramsey's hired some like additional personalities to be on his show, and I found them on my TikTok scrolling, and one of the guys that he had on said basically that these high-end sports that everyone's throwing all their, us suburban people are throwing all their money into, if you took that money and put it in a conservative stock mutual fund, you could probably pay for your kid to not only go to college, but probably private college. And
It,
also, there's no such thing as a professional 10-year-old baseball player. Like, there's
it's
no point. No point.
It's something I'm so glad that you brought this up because I didn't think that this would ever be something I would get a chance to talk about today. But like that's something that is so near and dear to me. Like my father was involved in sports growing up with me so much. And like I now knowing what it's like being an adult and how much of a inconvenience that must be as far as the
I
time
know.
commitments that go on to that one. Like, those kids of yours, they take a lot of time and they have a lot of variables to the schedule. It's not just taking cute pictures. As for
Right.
I understand,
It's
but
not just the Instagram, like, look at us practicing. It's no, there's a lot to it. And people
yeah,
spend 8, 9 hours playing baseball a week. It's like, dude, when's he gonna
but
be a kid?
I just look at that. I was so glad that my dad was involved because he wanted to make sure that it got done the right way. And like, with my
Mhm.
involvement in sports, like I didn't get involved in any type of coaching. One, because I was, in my partying ways kind of thing. So I was living in a town that I didn't grow up in outside of Wentworth College. And I got approached about coaching a lacrosse team because I was familiar with it. And I remember thinking to myself, well, one, I'm a 30-year-old guy that's single and doesn't have any kids. So there can be a weird look to that sometimes, as far as coaching other
Right.
people's kids. And then like the idea that like, people may want to look around and it's like, yeah, I'm the guy that hangs out at the bar 5 nights a week till last call. So that's probably not a
Yeah,
good
that's
look.
fine. That's
And then
fine.
also the idea of that I'm like the way that I was coached, if I was to coach that way, again, I might just be behind bars kind of thing. So I
Right.
never did that. But like in sports, there's something that my show was centered around and that I am centered around. And I'm kind of expanding away from that because we have lost like if you've ever seen the movie Basketball made by the South Park guys, it's like we
Yes.
really have lost all of the purity of this, where it's like to an extent we have made youth sports this financial thing where it's like at no
Oh,
point in
yeah.
time is there ever
No.
just going out there and playing for the sake of playing, it seems like, because now the kid has to have an Instagram account that they might be able to monetize or something like that,
Now,
like the baby Groms
Brody
of the world.
Brody
And
does have a rock climbing TikTok. He wanted to start a TikTok, my 9-year-old, and it's Brody Climbs, Brody Climbs, and he and his dad started it as like a way for Brody to learn about algorithms. But that's why he has it. He wanted to learn about algorithms.
okay, I mean that's
Because
or maybe he's just that smart that he even knows.
yeah,
That's like if
he
it's almost one of
yeah,
those things. If he's that smart to make that up as an excuse to con you into getting a TikTok, then
yeah.
kudos, touche, you
Like
win. If you're that
he
smart,
wants to
like
take. He's like, you need to take a video of me, and we need to find out what hashtags to use. Okay, whatever. I don't know where you came from, but okay.
I mean that's way too that's a very analytical brain at such a young age, which I appreciate. But I mean I'm someone that's kind of considered that way, but I don't think I was ever, I'm
Not
curious how I would
now,
have grown
no.
up if I had to do it again, because as I always talk about people that are of our generation, we're like really essential in this world because we have to connect the 60-year-olds to the 20-year-olds because
Mhm.
for the most part, the way that we began our lives were not too different from the 60-year-olds as far as, like basic communication methods and everything. And then we had to learn all of these things that have now become only what the 20-year-olds life have grown up with. So it's almost
Right.
like we're like that, like, we can kind of facilitate the language barriers to those extents. But I always try to think about what I would have been like if I grew up in the cell phone, the smartphone era. I
Oh,
mean, like, I was already somebody that if you put a camera on, I was going to do something to get the attention of it. So God knows, would I be one of those people that everyone hates, but I was, creating content that people actually enjoyed? Or as far as an athlete, like I might be probably thinking, oh, I'm getting NIL money. Like that might be the way that
oh
I'd be
yeah,
wired at this point, and I would
totally.
be thinking, like, I looked at the idea of that, like, when I played sports, the idea that I might be able to play in college just because I looked at that as being fun, being able to still continue to play a game that mattered. That was the
Yeah.
main goal I was getting out of it. I never ever anticipated anything more than that. And I played with people and you could tell that they had they'd lost the love of the sport because here they are, they're 16 years old, they're 17 years old. And it's like, they're treating it like a job where I'm treating this like kind of like just a hobby. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I knew I would never play college because I'm 5'5" and I'm not that fast, but I was really mean. So that's why I got to play as much as I did. I was just meaner than everybody else.
you could have come up to a New York D3. Like I just remember like there was a kid
Probably.
from Texas. His father was worked at A&M and then he transferred to the college in
Uh,
my hometown of Troy, New York,
uh,
RPI. and he was like, he was on we were a state champion football program. And then we had this kid, he was like, I was on the football team in Texas. And he was like talking about like, we had one of these guys that was one of the best football players in the state. And he was like, yeah, he might be on the team in Texas too, but I don't know if he'd be playing. So like, I always just kind of feel like that, like sports down there, I've understood are kind of like academic and physical, as far as you have like a classroom devoted to the sport, and then also like a practical in the field where, we're just kind of happy to get after it here and there. But so I guess I just want to get back to now, like, our experiences with our struggles and then how we overcame them. So you found yourself at the point, vomit frozen to your hair, which, in a fancy hotel. So is there, when did you start partying? Was it along the time playing sports? Was that like, did you kind of party as an athlete in high school?
No,
or did it really take off in college?
I was terrified of my parents. I didn't want to disappoint them. So I never drank in high school, never see here in rural Texas, you have to say it rural, not rural, as I grew up. I live in rural Texas, so it's rural.
No, that's how I say it too, but teach their own.
I've had to learn how to say words correctly in my late 30s. The accent still gets me sometimes, but I feel like it's better. But anyway, so I did not drink at all in high school. I was terrified that I would disappoint my parents. I wasn't even cool enough because I was the athlete that happened to be, in the honors classes. I never got invited to the pasture parties, because that's what we have in Texas and the country. You have pasture parties where people bring their Coors Light and whatever they steal from their mom's wine refrigerator. So I was never cool enough to get invited to those. But I really started drinking in college. I went to Baylor University, which is
Waco.
In Waco, and it's what a lot of people, they hear Baylor and they're like, oh, that's a random school in the Big 12. Well, it's actually also the largest Baptist school in the like, I think in the world. I actually looked that up the other day. It's one of the largest.
It's in Texas. Schools. It's got to be the biggest.
Yeah, of course. It's Texas. But but like Grand Canyon and Liberty University are technically bigger, but they're not Baptist affiliated. That's your fun fact for the day. But they are Christian schools. But my parents sent me there. Mainly, it's a Baptist school. Nothing bad's going to happen to Emily there. We want her to. My parents never talked to me, and this is a very Southern thing. They never talked to me about what to major in college, what kind of classes to take. It was, we're sending you to school, a fancy private school, so you can get married. And so when I got down there, I had no idea what kind of classes to take, what kind of people to actually associate with, try to find people who have like designer shoes on, and that's who should be my friends. And that was a lot. And I didn't feel like I belonged there either. We didn't have that kind of money. So I didn't feel like I belonged there. I didn't feel like I was smart enough to be there. And from what I saw, whenever anybody was stressed out or happy or sad, they just drank a lot of Boone's Farm, which was a very cheap wine you could get back in the day. So I would put it. Have you ever been to Sonic or heard of Sonic?
I've been to Sonic. Yeah.
So I would get like the Route 44. I would tell them I want a diet cherry limeade, but I only want it filled up halfway. And they're like, okay, that's weird. So I would get that, and then I'd pour the bottle of the strawberry Boone's Farm in there, and I would just walk around. That's how I would write all my term papers. Made really good grades on all of them. That's how I would do my homework. That's how I would literally do everything, because I felt like such an imposter being there and had so much anxiety about being in college around all these people who were way more qualified to be there than me. So that's how I functioned for a while.
Now, again, wow, we really have a lot of in common on there. I just remember, like the first time, that I drank, kind of being like as a high schooler kind of thing. And it was, just I look at it as the extent of that, like when I say that we were raised in a certain way, is that it was almost like kind of like because of the movie culture, I would kind of say, or like just the way that things were, it was kind of like, this is just what you do as a teenager. Like, you're supposed to, do these things or whatever. And the idea that like, like there was almost like this, like, again, with the competitive nature that people had, like there was this like sense of prowess, like, if like, did you hear he drank 8 beers at the party the other night? It's like, oh my
Mhm.
God, like the other person can only drink 4, like, and because I could kind of take that, which is like just such like insane thinking, that I would actually be impressed, where it's like when you really realize what you're doing to yourself, kind of that ordeal. But I kind of know what you mean about that imposter thing, of that, like, and here's the thing, is that you probably felt that way at college. Trust me when I tell you, probably 90% of the other
Everybody
people
else
probably
probably
felt the
did
same
too.
exact same way
Yeah.
about you. So it's kind of one of those weird things, is that, this is what I enjoy about having conversations with people that have kind of gone through some kind of a journey like us, because we're always capable of, I feel like it's the most honest conversations you can probably have, of that, like you and I live very, very different lives, I'm sure, but we have so much in common in that sense, and we would never realize that unless we chatted. And you do realize that people are a lot more similar than there, or that people that kind of come from that. But I mean, that was kind of the way I felt, is that like I was the first person in my family to go to college. I always did well in school. It just kind of came easy to me. So I took it for granted. And like, I always kind of found myself in this series of, I'm doing things that maybe I don't want to do. I just think that I should be doing.
Mhm.
Like, and that was kind of how, like, I never really knew what I wanted to do. Like, I love doing this. I love just kind of interacting with people and doing these things. But like the idea of how to figure out how to turn that into a paycheck, like that's ultimately, we have to figure out what we're doing, with our lives. But like in college, like I never really, yeah, I had that whole thing of that I don't belong here. I'm just faking my way through this or whatever. And then
Right.
even in the party scene, though, I did kind of feel that sense of comfort, because I was willing to, I was able to do the balancing act of it. And I almost kind of became this character of myself, like where it's like, I used to love, like in college, I had like this business class that I was a part of. It was on Thursday mornings. Wednesday night there was a bar in town that had $2.50 pitcher nights.
Oh, that sounds
And
like fun.
so it was pitchers of Busch Light, and it seemed like everybody in the business department at my school was go there or whatever like that. And then I used to have like this, like almost like, how stupid this sounds, of that I would walk in and love that people were impressed that I made it to class the next day because of what I looked like
Oh
the
yeah.
last time that they had seen me or whatever like that. This idea of being able to hold it together or whatever. And that's kind of also where it infiltrated into my professional thing, but where it's like, I'm kind of curious on your sense of that. I was living this life where it was kind of broadcasting that I was partying so much, but like was still holding it together and doing the regular things, as far as like going to the gym and being active and stuff, that like made people believe that I was not as far as along as I was, where it sounds
Mhm.
like you were flying completely under the radar.
Oh yeah.
As far
Oh yeah,
so
I was the Hannah Montana. I got the best of both worlds, so to speak. I would I would be in the library at school with my giant cup, just sitting here drinking, and I'm gonna type this paper. I'm so drunk, it's gonna be so good. And then I would write the paper, and it would make sense, and I would get like a 95 on it. It made no sense.
it's
And,
it,
and
it
then
is
and
weird how
then
sometimes you do have these superpowers. I don't
yeah,
know how,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it is.
Well, and then like 3 days later, I would be, I was intramural assistant chair of my sorority. And be like, okay, guys, we got to make sure that we shoot the basket so we can win the game, so we can kick the ball, so we can win soccer. And then after the game, I'd be, with the Sonic Cup, and it was a running joke, like, oh, we wonder what's in Emily's soccer cup. She, what's in her Sonic Cup. She makes all these great grades, but she just lives in the library. Like, what is she actually doing there? And what I was doing was getting really drunk and writing really great papers and doing my homework. That's what I was
Well,
doing.
I've always joked around about this, though, is that you have to have the drinking problem to be a good writer. I feel like, to be able to,
Probably,
somebody,
yeah.
because again, where you mentioned the big thing was that anxiety being a one. I'll tell you, this one is me doing a writer. I was a decent writer at one point in time. If I was to write, say, a 10-page paper, I would probably spend 75% of the time writing the first paragraph.
Yeah, you're like this. You're like, oh my gosh, I gotta get it done. What am I gonna do? And then as
And
soon as you put your fingers on the keyboard, it's usually better. You just gotta get past that block and actually put it down and start going.
but then I have no problem with the spoken word. Like, it's kind of that, like, I
Yeah.
mean, I actually used to be a stand-up comedian at one point in time, and it's like,
Oh,
there is the anxiety of getting up there, but then once I get up there, like me doing this right now, once I say something, I just have to say it on there. But when I'm writing something, I'm the type of person that's editing on the fly because all I'm trying to do is just trying to make sure I don't sound like an idiot. That's really, and like I'm like, as I'm reading this, I'm like, does that make me sound like an idiot?
Yeah.
Like, it's really one of my biggest fears in life. And that's kind of when you're in that academic environment, you're the most terrified of doing because you're being judged
Yeah.
on whether or not you make sense or not.
Well, and
And
I was so good at hiding what I was doing that my boyfriend, who is now my husband, we've been together 18 years if you count the 4 years we dated in college. He had no idea what I was doing. He had no idea. He was just like, "Oh yeah, she's got her Sonic drink. She brushes her teeth a lot. I don't know why she does that. She uses a lot of mouthwash. I don't know." Like he had no idea. Nobody
and
had
then
any
and
idea.
then and then when you get it's the reveal, it all makes sense. And to an extent, did you think that you got the thrill out of the double life kind of,
Oh yeah. Oh
because
yeah,
I
it's like
always,
nobody knows what I'm doing. Nobody knows how I'm able to do this. Ha ha ha. Yes, I'm still thin and I make good grades and I'm popular. Ha 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 ha. Like
I mean,
nobody knew.
yeah, I mean, like that was kind of for me was like, I mean, some people would be on to me like that, I guess I would call it, but like the idea that I worked in sales and the idea being that as long as I was doing my job well, and like to an extent, working on a commission-based job and having this lifestyle that I was living, I actually was better at my job because I needed to fuel the beasts kind of to an
Oh
extent. And
yeah.
it's like, it's amazing what you'll do to kind of get that done. But I don't want, I did a little bit of, browsing for you as far as, your website. And I did look at your profile there, and I just saw a post you put up recently that you were drinking 4 bottles of white wine a day.
Yes. Yeah. Sure
Now, I mean,
was.
I could definitely see that white wine being easier to do than red wine because wintertime here, I used to enjoy my wines.
Yeah.
But I would maybe be able to do like a 175 of a red. And I mostly like that because I would curl up in a blanket. I'd binge watch my TV shows and, you don't have to get up to use the bathroom as much. And you can just kind of, when your glass is empty, you can just fill it
Right.
back up because,
You
the
can
red
go
on
in.
there. But 4 bottles of wine, I mean, geez, I mean,
Yeah. There
that's,
were times where it was 4 bottles of wine a night. I think one week I went through 20 bottles. Um, it was intense, but it got that way. There was after I got out of school, I got married 90 days after I graduated college. And we had this between graduating and us having our first son 5 years later. We just went on a giant party spree because neither one of us really my husband didn't know how crazy I was in college, even though we went to the same school and we were there. I hung out with him all the time. He just didn't know what I was doing. We went on this crazy, basically party binge for 5 years where, okay, we're off work at 5, we're going to go to the bar. And I became a great weekend binge drinker. I discovered dark beer, loved
oh,
that because of all the sugar in it and it would make my brain feel nice. And discovered gin. I became a sweaty old man. And I mean, we were just having the time of our lives. And when I got pregnant with my oldest, who's now 9, obviously all that came to a halt because you can't drink while you're pregnant. That's
no, you
depressing.
shouldn't. You shouldn't
You
do
shouldn't
that.
do that. You shouldn't do that. And but as soon as he was born, I had a friend bring me champagne in labor and delivery. Like I was being willed to postpartum, and my friend, she was like, "Hey, I got the champagne." I was like, "Let's do it." So I was back at it literally maybe 2 days after giving birth.
Ah,
Not like that, but that's what all of our other friends that had babies did. Like somebody brought the champagne and you just partied in the room. That's what we did.
and that's what ends
Um,
up. You had a group that you ran with, kind of
oh
thing? Was
yeah,
there was the
it was
because that's what I
crazy.
was asking too. Is that obviously
Yeah.
you had this kind of secret thing, but you also, I mean, were you completely alone in this misery? I guess I would say, or did you kind of always have your party buddies, or did you
After
have other
oh yeah.
people who maybe knew a little bit, but not still to the extent?
Oh, after we got out of college and we were working, we had all the friends because we were all 22, 23. First time getting big girl, big boy money. And we were like, yes, we have $300. We're going to party now. And that's what we all did. And it was a mixture of people from work, people we met in our young married Sunday school class, people that I knew from high school that lived in Dallas at the time. So it was a free for all. And, but after we had Brody is when things kind of went from being a weekend drinking binge to me kind of venturing into day drinking. I was a stay-at-home mom. I got laid off while I was pregnant with him. So, and we moved and we had some other things happen. And I thought it would just, it's fine to have a glass of Chardonnay in the middle of the day. It's fine to make a gin and tonic at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's totally fine. It was not fine. But so by the time Scott got home from work and I'm fixing dinner, I'd already had 2 or 3 cocktails or 2 or 3 glasses of wine. And so I'd pour him his glass too, and he had no idea that I was already buzzed.
Yep.
But
and then you kind of sneak it in there, then now if you have one or two more, then I know the games. I know the tricks. I know the tricks.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. And when I eventually went back to work, we became great weekend partiers. And we eventually moved to Houston. I think Brody was 2.5, and I'm really bad at math, but we've been here for like 7 years. So whatever 2025 minus 7 is. But yeah, we got here, and then it got where I went from. I had been a day drinker, but I stopped that, and then I became this weekend binge drinker. And then when the pandemic happened, we were all at home. And I don't know how it was where you were, but people were literally raiding the liquor store and buying things. So we, of course, did the same thing. And so we had more alcohol in our house than we never had before. And at the time, I work in insurance. I'm a territory manager for a carrier, which means I call agents and tell them to sell more insurance.
I did my stint in insurance.
Yeah, it's a good job. Well, at the time, I was a workers' comp claims adjuster. And people are not happy when they get hurt at work, especially during a pandemic. And I didn't know how to separate work from my real life. So, and of course, we're all working from home. I was working in the bedroom. My husband, who's also in insurance, was working in our office, which is this room, but this is now my room due to him making some career. But it was really hard to shut your computer off, and you just got yelled at by a claimant, and now you're still in the same room, and you're supposed to sleep in here too. That was hard, and so instead of journaling, praying, doing anything productive to deal with the stress of COVID, I just went to the grocery store and bought wine or whiskey or gin or whatever happened to be on sale. Dark beer became my friend. So we were drinking a lot. And I was drinking more than my husband was. He would have like one whiskey and be fine. And I'm over here, let's put all the Maker's Mark in there. How much can we feel it? And he was just kind of like,
Maker's Mark. I could actually, when you said Maker's Mark, I can actually taste that, and I haven't touched Maker's Mark in probably 5 years.
It's like in your esophagus. It's like.
I can there's a certain fume that is hitting me in the nose of that. Like Maker's Mark, I don't think I ever actually tasted because of the smell of it. Like, if that makes sense.
It's very intense, but whatever I could get my hands on. And, I was having what I thought was the time of my life, and I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew it. And, I'm a Christian, been a Christian since I was about 14 years old. So I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew not praying, not asking God, to help me deal with stress. I knew all this was wrong for about a decade plus, actually. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want to do anything about it because I'm Emily. I'm going to fix it myself. I don't need anybody. I can do it.
And that's kind of, again, where I say that generational mentality. I feel like that was the way, at least the way that I felt that I was raised, that was the kind of the way you went about it. If anything, the way that the typical, the male, I'm an Irish guy, you just drink your problems away is kind of like, almost like the stereotype that you kind of fall into. And And yeah, the COVID was the one that, I mean, that's where I really started my tripped off the deep end. I mean, I always had things into control, and I was somebody that, I mean, maybe I'm lying by saying control, but like I was somebody who would take a month off. Like that would be the closest thing I would compare to a pregnancy, is that, like I would take
Mhm.
1 month out of the year and do that off there. And like that hit me when you said 2 days after you gave birth, you went right back to doing what you were doing. That was always my thing, where people would interpret that because I could take a month off of drinking, that maybe I wasn't so bad
You
as
had
I was portraying
control.
myself. But then the fact
Mhm.
is that if I take 31 days off and on the 32nd day I'm just making up for lost time essentially, then what was I really accomplishing? Like it's kind of like you took a break, but you didn't improve anything. Is kind of the
Right.
almost the attitude I had there. And COVID, where it's like, again, like I'm not somebody that necessarily prescribes to the religious thing. As I mean, I have my beliefs. I'm a spiritual person. I don't have like a
Mhm.
formal set of beliefs. I think that things are beyond my level of comprehension is just my way of accepting things. I just accept there is something more than me, but I don't put a defined set of,
Right.
rules onto it, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
everybody, whatever they had that worked for them as far as a healthy outlet during the pandemic was taken away from them. Like whether it being that you go to church or whatever, or even the idea of like I always drank, but like I wasn't going out and drinking with the people that I would drink with, where it was kind of like we all would watch out for each other in a sense of that, like we had this like
Mhm.
responsibility as bar regulars to make sure that, we weren't screwing ourselves up too much, because we could observe from the outside. And ultimately, if the guy who I drink with every night tells me that he's worried about me, that makes, it's a little different
Like,
as far as he doesn't
oh,
want to say this to me because he's losing a drinking buddy. But, if I'm
right.
making it not fun for them to be around or something. But I felt like that was anything. I mean, like, I just think of this dystopian thing, and I feel like that Texas probably was a little bit more lax than New York was during
Mhm.
this time. But like, I was just all the things that I would normally do to, be productive and healthy to get through this angst of the situation that was going on in the world would be like, I would go to the gym. Gyms were closed. Like I remember driving past the basketball court that I would shoot baskets at, and seeing that there had like the rim like bolted over. And I'm like, like this looks like an awful, awful movie. Like to the point that if I went for a walk and I ran into somebody else, it was almost like kind of like a fear of like, what are you doing out here? Like, kind of thing. And I
Right.
think it was just
Oh
really a
yeah.
weird time that I knew a lot of people just that little bit of extra behavior, the idea of that you probably, because you were working home, able to get that extra drink or two more. I know a lot of people who really got better after COVID because of that weird time period that we went through, where we maybe whatever we did, that was the other thing. It was almost encouraged during that period of time, like
Yeah.
you close down a restaurant, but hey, liquor stores are still open. You can still you can get drinks to go now from the bar just to try to keep
Yeah.
the business going. Like, the idea of that, like I remember laughing of that. I'm walking past the cop and I have a to go, because I would pick up lunch for work. I used to do that there, but I would be like, oh, I'm going to go pick up lunch. And that would be me being able to get a drink to go from work or whatever. And me like walking in the streets past a police officer and being like, this is technically an open container, but we've changed the
Well,
rules
they
now.
put a tape on it, so it's not open, right? They
Right,
put
right,
tape
right.
on
Even
it.
though it's like if I'm just taking, I mean, it's like it's almost like we're now just it's a brown paper bag almost, because if I'm taking a drink out of a cup with a
Right.
straw in it, you're actually more reasonably to think that there's not alcohol in it than there is.
Oh yeah.
It was a
Oh yeah.
weird, wild time there. So you kind of, you had like the rock bottom moment there that it all
Yeah.
led to this of that, and I got to imagine, if you're trying to hide a wine problem just because of the bottles, how hard that must be. Like, liquor, you can kind of fill some different vessels up and you can kind of scatter that about. But if you're actually hiding, when you're drinking that many bottles of wine, I mean, that had to be part of the game. Like, I'm almost thinking of Shawshank Redemption when Andy Dufresne is his favorite
Yes.
activity is getting rid of the dirt that he's getting out of there. I mean, keeping
Right.
those off your scent there, that's got to be a little bit
Well,
harder.
it was like, okay, I finished this bottle of wine. Now I've had 3 beers the night before. So how am I going to hide this so my husband doesn't think I am insane? Okay, I'm gonna make sure he's not watching, and I'm gonna put these in the recycling because he doesn't actually look in the recycling because I'm the one that rolls the trash out. So, and like, oh, and we had we were still, we had, everybody would get boxes from Amazon because that's what
Okay.
we did during the pandemic, right? So I would put bottles in the Amazon boxes, put those in the recycling. That way it was undercover. It was, oh, okay, nobody needs to know. He doesn't need to know. But kind of the turning point, which got me to realize that, having that moment in the mirror in the hotel, November, I had to fly November 2020 to Dallas for Thanksgiving. And I was so nervous about flying during COVID that we have a restaurant here, and it was in not in the hotel, in the airport. It's called Papados. It's very famous here in the
I've
Houston
heard of it.
area. It's like Papados. There's Papa's barbecue, like Papa's everything. And I had about 4 margaritas in about a 2-hour period. And this is Texas. We like tequila. We like that tequila real good. So I passed out on the plane. And that's when I was like, I might really need to stop this. I don't know. This isn't, normal probably. And I kind of mulled that over for about 6 weeks. And at the time in 2021, Colorado had just opened back up, and you could get flights there really cheap. We got this fancy hotel room in downtown Denver for super cheap. It was like the suite at the Hyatt downtown, was very fancy, things that we could normally not afford. But like, why not? We'll just, in my mind, I told my husband, we're flying Southwest because it's Texas. And I told him, let's just drink before we get on the plane, so that way we'll kill the COVID if it gets in us, And he's like,
sound
sure.
logic. I like your style.
Alcohol kills everything, brain cells, and COVID, right? Let's do it. So we get
similar theories.
Yeah. So I'm like, let's just drink on the plane. It'll be fine. And that's also what we did most of the time when we were in Denver, because everything had opened back up and they were so happy to see people. They had all these bars, all these other places, all these restaurants that we wanted to go to. They had all these drink specials. So we were drinking and eating and drinking and eating, walking around. We drove to Colorado Springs and the Garden of the Gods. Buzzed. Don't do that. Because it was open, because it was outdoors. So we were walking around and we did all sorts of things. But one night, I don't know how much I had to drink. Scott didn't have as much as I did. He never had as much as I did. But I had so much to drink. Like, he had already passed out in bed, but I was still in the bathroom just dry heaving. Like, and also, I don't know about you, but when you drink, you like to eat. And I overate, I overdrank, and I'm just sitting there, it's just coming out. It's coming out of my mouth. It's coming out of my nose. It's just coming out, vomit. And I remember looking at the toilet seat, because I'd raised it, obviously, I wasn't that drunk. And I just was like, this is my life. And I remember things just going black. And I woke up 5-6 hours later. I've got vomit all here. I'm on the back of my head. I've got vomit in my hair, and I'm trying to get up, but it's like, what is going on here? And I stood up, and a chunk of my hair is still on the floor because it had thrown up so much, and it had come out of my mouth and gotten in my hair. And can you tell I like my hair? I like my hair a lot. I pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
I pay a lot of money for it. And a chunk of my hair is on the ground. And I look at where I've fallen, and I could tell, because I'd hit my head here and here, that if I had fallen just a little bit differently, I would have fallen in the toilet bowl, and I would have drowned on my own vomit and on toilet water.
Which would be one of the worst ways to,
that would be a terrible way to go, right? Like, that would be an awful way to go. And so I stand up. I don't know how I was able to stand up, but I stood up, covered in my own vial or bile, whatever. And I look at myself in the mirror, and I hear this little voice. And I know it was the Holy Spirit, because I know that now after 4 years of doing this sobriety thing. And the little boy said, "Are you done now? Are you done yet?" And I physically said out loud, "Yes, I'm done." And then I also said, "If you'll help me kick this, I'm going to help other people." And so that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. And my husband thought that, when we were on the plane ride home, he asked me, "Well, do you want to get a margarita?" I'm like, no, I'm done drinking. And if you ask him, he'll tell you that he thought this was going to be another one of my times where I was going to stop drinking. I knew for a really long time I had a problem. I just didn't want to say anything. And I wanted to stop drinking because of I'm I'm a little bit vain. I do married beauty pageants, and we'll talk about that soon. But like I've always, prided myself on my appearance, and I knew if I'd stop drinking, I would lose weight. And so that's what I always said. I'm gonna stop drinking so I can lose weight. I'm just gonna stop drinking. Very selfish, self-centered reasons, right? But on the plane ride home, he was like, "All right, well, they serve them on the plane too. So if you need it, we can get it." And he just kind of watched me over a couple of months, and he's like, "Wow, she's gone 2 months without drinking. This is interesting. I don't know what this is like. We haven't done this in 10 years." But it was a very radical change. No more going. No more go. We took since we live in such a family friendly area, we used to take Brody to the bar with us because they had children's menus. They had like cherry limeades they would give the kids. And, that's what we would do. And it was a radical change for us. And Brody would go, there was a bar here, and he goes, we're not getting the mac and cheese tonight, because they made really good mac and cheese. I'm like, "No, we're not going back to get mac and cheese." "I'm so sad, no mac and cheese." I'm like, "Yeah, no mac and cheese here." So it was a very radical change.
Well, and that's been part of my struggle with my own self right now is that, I mean, I like doing something like this. Like, I miss the social interactions. I miss being able to not know who my best friend was going to be for that night and being able to, make that connection and meet those people. So that's part of the reason I do the show, is to be able to, you know, have those random, friends for a couple hours and then, go about our lives kind of deal, but get to know somebody a little bit. I always did miss that aspect of it, but my whole life was kind of constructed around it, that it's become like, like, as an adult, it's like I had to relearn how to do life. Like, what does a normal like, I say normal, but there is no such thing as normal in all reality.
Right.
But I'm kind of like, like, all right, like, what do I, everything I've ever known has been, okay, we go out for drinks here, or we go out for dinner and have drinks and whatnot. And it's kind of like, there is this like kind of enforced culture in America. It's part of the Americana almost. I mean, you just mentioned barbecue places being big down there. It's like barbecue and beer is America,
Oh yeah.
like, I mean, to an extent, like,
You gotta have your Coors Light with your brisket. Like if you don't, who
I'm a
are you?
Budweiser guy myself, but to each their own.
Oh,
And I was going to say
mhm.
too, probably part of the reason that you had that experience, all things are meant to be. But when you described the evening that you had in Colorado, the altitude is probably what pushed you over the edge. You have to adjust
Probably.
to the altitude. So I've always heard, I never went to Denver, but I was always told you got to accept the fact that you got to take a little bit of time to adjust there. So, if you have pride in your ability to because again, strangely enough, I had pride in my drinking prowess. Like, again, me being
Oh,
five
same.
foot seven, 100 and, well, at one point getting up into the 200 pounds thing. But I always loved the idea of that, like, people knowing that no matter how big you were, that I could hang with you in that realm, kind of, which is just insane. And like, you hit the head on so many times of the idea of that you knew that you were doing something wrong, but you did it anyways. And I don't know why I was kind of doing that. And like, I kind of had that, it's, similar thing with where an airport for me got there, is that I did have the thing where I woke up, I went on a little bit of a rampage, or I started doing the day drink because I didn't want to have that hangover the next day. And when you were talking about your husband saying like, "Hey, did you want to get a margarita?" Like, that was kind of the way of that, like, you kind of, I would call it the maintenance beer. If you went at it hard, you couldn't just go straight into sobriety. You kind of like, okay, I'm going to a Bloody Mary to kind of calm
Right.
things down a little bit, which is like, you're just delaying this inevitable. And I probably went on a stretch where I was on a massive bender that, really delayed the inevitable for too long. And then I just had that wake up moment where I was like, I need to eventually stop. And I'm worried about what's going to happen too. But I did have a relapse experience. It did happen in an airport where, airport drinking was always one of my favorites
Yeah,
because
it's
again, like I'm
fun.
going to meet, everyone's
You're
got
not
their
going to
anxiety about
drive.
certain
You're
things.
not driving the plane.
Right, exactly. It's like I just want to sit there and relax and have a good time. But it's like, again, I'm gonna meet somebody, and like for somebody like myself who's, likes interacting with people, and as a comedian, like I almost have an act I can play when I meet new people, and like, I would get the engagement of being able to make somebody laugh or whatever like that. Like you never know who you're gonna meet at an airport, and you never know if they're coming or going, like for what part of the world, but you get the interesting story. So airport drinking was always favorite for mine, but I had the experience of passing out in St. Louis's airport and having to find out that I overslept my flight. God bless Delta for not charging me, but getting me on another connecting flight, but effectively having to dry out in an airport for 15 hours, literal hell on earth, as I would describe it,
That
of that,
doesn't sound like fun. No.
And then of course I'm on, you mentioned the thing, people taking pride in their experience or like that. Of course, I have my flight back home. I'm sitting next to one of the most beautiful women I've ever been around in my entire life. And I'm just seeping whiskey out of my pores and just look like, shit run over twice. And I'm like, yes, this is like all the reminder. But, I had the little slip ups on there, but, just kind of the whole feeling of that, knowing that I was killing myself kind of deal, or that I eventually realized that things I thought were okay. What I always look at is that whenever you're engaging in behaviors you can tell fewer and fewer people about, without getting, judgment or criticized, that's when I feel like that we've went too far. And like, I got to the point that I didn't want to tell anybody what I was doing. And like, like I even like had this little setup that I would go to a bar and just do a beer and a shot and then just go to the next bar kind of thing. Because like, okay, like by the time I get to the last ones, I'm going to be noticeably, inebriated. But the fact that I'd be like, yeah, just beer and a shot, close it out. You'd get like the pity of the bartender kind of thing,
Right.
kind of going on there. So what was, obviously you've kind of approached this from a religious angle. I did the kind of detox route for a little bit, and I always knew that I didn't want to go to rehab because I was like, I think that there's something more going on with me than the alcohol. And we kind of have touched upon that about like the anxieties and whatnot. But did you, and AA kind of was not for me, kind of went on. So I've kind of have just, found my own way of recovery, is that I kind of, in the weirdest way of that, I want my power to be to not need AA. I'm just a stubborn asshole. And that's how I'm kind of wired of that, I'll do everything I have to do to not go back there kind of ideal. What was it that worked for you and what got you going? I mean, obviously you do the pageantry. So is taking pride in your appearance part of your, is that one of your releases, or how do you go about your recovery?
It's a part of the fun. It's the fun part. But
yes.
In those early days when we came home, again, it's 2021. It's very, a lot of things had opened up in Texas, but not everything. And I tried to find an AA group. It's like, well, I need to find some sort of group to go to. And a lot of them are still meeting online. And I'm not one to go to a random online meeting and talk about my feelings. I'm not doing that. But what I did, I tried to find a facility here in where I'm at. There aren't any facilities for women. There's none. So I did what I do best, because I looked it up, I researched, and I found some really great books to read. And one of them was Alan Carr's The Easy Way to Quit Drinking. So I read that, and that pretty much talked me out of drinking. And there was another book, it's called How to Quit Like a Woman. And I can't remember who wrote it, but your audience can Google it and figure it out. But basically, she talked about in this book how alcohol, there's so much marketing done towards women, and especially in the alcohol space, because the men are already all hooked. The men are already getting liver cancer. The men are already dying. We are their leftover market. That's why these White Claws have been developed. That's why wine is so much more readily available and cheaper. That's why mommy wine glass culture, mommy sippy cup, that's why it's become a thing, because they need more money. So that made me mad, because I don't like being tricked into things. And also, there was a part in that book where she talked about how the suffragette movement, the right, for women to get the right to vote.
Mhm.
These women they so wanted to be viewed like men, equal rights, equal everything. So what they did was they did a smoke out with cigars and cigarettes, because at the time smoking was a man thing. Women didn't do that. It was very unladylike. So they hosted a smoke out to prove that they were superior and just the same as men because they could smoke. And that's basically what big alcohol's done with booze. It's, you can hold your liquor too, be a man. You can be a man. And do we really want to be a man? No.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. There's so many things of that, I wouldn't there's certain women experiences I would never want. And there are certain things about the man experience. I'm like, why would you want this? Kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, and the other part too, which gets, dangerous for the woman situation, is that's part of the archetype of the guy. Realistically, when guys get into drinking, it's like they're almost portraying some sort of character kind of, that they're falling into. And part of that aesthetic is having the pretty lady by your side kind of deal. And, the idea that, we'll kind of, it's amazing how much free booze pretty women can get, or how much more like they are accepted in that community, because they make if we have pretty things around us, it hides the ugliness of the situation that we're in, I guess, or something, I guess,
Right.
would be the way to look at it. Kind of, I just kind of came up with that on the spot. But no, I never looked at it as that way. And like, honestly, my thing of that, I found myself in the days of White Claw is that I was doing them because I was trying to, part of my way of keeping me off my scent was the fewer calories. I'm like, listen, if I'm drinking at least 10 to 15 beers a day, I'm like, if I can cut 400 calories off on this one, that's all the more better for me.
That's why they made them. And that's why they made Michelob Ultra. So
see, I could never, Bud Light was as far as I could go down that pole of that, it get to a point of that, like, I always looked at it. This was actually the way I was wired, is I'm like, you can only get so drunk on Bud Lights. Like, you can't do anything. If you only drink Bud Light, nothing bad will happen, was actually a freaking expression I used, because eventually you get so full, you just can't really do any more damage. Then eventually Bud Light just became my Aquafina between shots of Jameson.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Was kind of how I looked at it. But, I love the idea of, being able to pound a Bud Light pretty fast or whatever like that. But,
yeah.
No, it is weird. They're falling into that. I mean, that's part of the whole thing, is that I'm somebody that I struggle with. Like, I took marketing in college, and I do sales, and I understand some of the psychology that goes into all these things. And like, there is nothing worse than, as a consumer, me falling for consumer behavior tricks that I know exist, kind of thing.
Oh, right.
So it is kind of frustrating, because again, it's like, I got duped into that whole thing. And then, I mean, it is just kind of weird of that we have so like ingrained into the culture. Like, I remember part of the reason that I kind of fell into the way I was going to is that like, it was almost like told to me that this is just what you do at these ages. Like, like, you're going to go to college and you're going to drink, it's like, it's part of the culture, that it's kind of established. And we have really gotten away from that, almost, I would say, even to a dangerous level in this country, because
the Gen Z kids, they don't drink, but they're doing other things.
They've
got CBD. They're doing more marijuana. They're doing, like I live here in a very fluffy suburb, and those kids are doing like cocaine. Like, they're doing real drugs.
Right. I
mean, we wouldn't have touched in school. We wouldn't have been like, oh, that's no. Like, we would have never done that.
Well, I also, the thing I joke around about this is that our generation finally took it too far and ruined drinking for everybody else. But then the other thing is that it's the accessibility and the concealability. Like, we were just talking about the hell that we have to go through for you in hiding the wine bottles and stuff like that, covering the scent of your breath up and whatnot. The fact of the matter is that I can just eat a little piece of chocolate that an hour later, like, I mean, like, the idea for the kids thing is that what can be going on in their room that mom won't know about, It used to be, if you smoked a joint in your room, guess what? It's going to stink in the entire house. Now it's a little hit from a vape or something like that. Or, even like the idea of just like smoking cigarettes, kind of. But the idea of that, like, I mean, I'm somebody, I'll be completely upfront. I'm a casual marijuana user. I'm not 100% sober. And I kind of look at that as that, if like, I know what to look at for problems on there, but the idea of that, hey, every now and again, I can, tip back and relax and kind of do that. It's not like that one's a harder one to conceal because of the smell and the way that you certainly kind of look or whatever like that. But, the idea is sometimes on a Friday night, hey, I'm just going to watch this movie and chill out. It's like, like it does suck for alcohol, because for the people that can do it right, it is fun, or if you can actually
Right.
have one glass of wine with dinner and get that, slight euphoric experience,
Yeah.
or like, how
But
the
now with
Italians.
alcohol being linked to like 7 types of cancer and they're wanting to put black box labels on all the alcohol, I hope that people actually think about what they're putting in their bodies instead. Because if you think about it, when you go to the grocery store and you buy like whatever, wine, beer, gin, whatever, there's no ingredient list on there. Like, because
Yeah.
think about it, if you buy Skittles, you're going to know every kind of dye that's in there. You have no idea what you're putting in your body. So I hope that people kind of think about that more. I don't know if alcohol sales will, go down, probably not. But I hope people think about that now instead of just blindly drinking all, red wine because some study came out 25 years ago and said it was good for you. And whether or not you should know that that study was actually, sponsored by the company that made the alcohol itself. So
Oh,
how valid
100%.
is that study?
I always think of that movie. Have you ever seen the movie Thank You for Smoking?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and it's like the whole thing of that. There's the one scene in the beginning where he's introducing the guy, and he was like, "This guy has found no link between smoking and cancer. The guy's a genius." Like, like it's like, you can find a way to promote everything. And yeah, that is, I mean, the getting duped thing. Let's not even get me started on that. Like, again, I believe that, when you mentioned with the food supply thing, is that, and to the extent too, is that people put that information in there. Unfortunately, there are some people that are never going to do anything with that information. Like I've begotten, the idea of that, as I quit drinking and I started feeling good and, looking better, like that's one of the things I've kind of taken on as the new high in life that I get is, the idea of like the getting, like feeling as clean and as pure as possible sometimes, like that, the idea of eating good foods and getting a good workout and sleeping well and all that stuff. Like you think you feel good ever a couple drinks, that feels way better than that's ever going to feel, as far as like
Oh
the,
yeah.
the
Well,
high that you get from that one.
being healthy is a great side effect of not drinking. After I stopped drinking, which was January 8th, we found out in about April that I was actually pregnant with our second child, and we were not trying to have him at all. He just appeared. But during that pregnancy was so different, and I think it's because I had about 3 months of not having any of that in my system, and I had kind of started working out back in 2020 at home, but I was active. The gyms had opened up in 2021. So I was back at the gym. I was working out with a group of girls, and this pregnancy was very different from my first pregnancy. And I had all these friends, and I was like, yeah, I just got pregnant, but I'm, stopped drinking in January, and I want to stop drinking for the rest of my life. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. How can we help you? How can we support you? So when you start working out, especially you're consistent, you're going to make friends. You're going to meet new people that have better habits than those friends at the bar. It's just so much better. And I've actually lost from when I stopped drinking, I weighed about 225 pounds.
Oh,
I was a big
Jesus.
girl. I was a big girl.
Everything's
And
bigger in Texas.
everything's bigger in Texas. But I didn't really gain any weight while I was pregnant. I was working out. I was very adamant about what I was eating. And now I don't weigh 200 plus pounds anymore. I weigh a lot less. I've lost about 85 pounds since then. So, you take those calories away, you develop new habits. I'm not going to say your life is overall going to be so much better, but if you're doing different things, you're going to get a different outcome.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, for my sake, I during COVID, I ballooned up. I mean, I was kind of someone that's still balanced out. Like, and I actually remember when I actually had my last hurrah, I'll call it, I was still in the depths of, I was training for a 10K Tough Mudder. So when
Oh,
I was actually in a detox facility where like, I was coming off of a hard 10 days where I was probably not even kidding, having like 30 drinks a day.
oh
And
wow.
I remember the one doctor saying to me, he was like, he took my vitals and he like looked at my resting heart rates and it was like still only like in like the 60 some odd beats per minute range. And he was like, "What are you doing here, buddy?" He's like, "You're healthier than I am," kind of deal. Not my blood pressure through the roof, obviously, but
Right.
and I was like, "Well, I'm training for a tough mudder." He's like, "It says here you're drinking 30 drinks a day." I'm like, "Well, yeah, yeah." I'm like, "I just had a rough week or two, kind of there, kind of thing." But then, for me, when I went, because I was one of those people that avoided going to a doctor because I didn't want them, like again, the
Oh yeah.
rationale going through my head of that I'm scared of what they might tell me. I'm comfortable accepting my fate of what will happen. I'm scared of knowing about it exactly is kind of like, that's when you're clearly far along where you're just not operating in your own best interest. You're
Well,
operating to
it's
beat
the
an addiction,
denial.
not to better yourself. And I went 6 weeks of, when I quit the first time to a doctor's appointment. I got evaluated and I was 36 years old at the time or whatever, maybe 37, 36 before my 37th birthday. And the guy telling me that, like, just off this brief time, knowing the numbers they told me when I was in one, medical facility, and then 6 weeks later to have them tell me what I was having. And the guy literally saying I was the textbook health of a 36-year-old man. And I'm like, well, you're not going to be hearing that much longer. Because when I originally first quit drinking, I never had any plan for it to be the forever thing, which was
Mhm.
kind of, I just knew that I shouldn't do it. And hearing stuff like that, I was like, if you keep going down this road, you're not going to hear that much longer. And the idea of how much I'd improved myself and just starting to think of that, like, how much I have been shortchanging myself from a physical standpoint, from a financial standpoint,
Oh yeah.
just all of these little things of that, like beating myself up. And like, I like hearing that, and the idea that I look at it, I'm gonna look better on my 40th birthday than I did on my 30th. Like I like being able to have that kind of pride on there. But then also, I don't change the fact that all these things happen. I like, like I'm not necessarily ashamed of them. I don't want to glamorize them, but I can always say that they're part of the experience and I understand these things. But that was kind of a big to do for me, was that, realizing that, like I actually, I'm giving some gifts, don't waste them, kind of basically being the
Right.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, and this, and also too, of the idea of, like, working out when you don't drink, it's amazing how much easier it actually clicks and takes into the accounts, kind of deal. So I like having that, having a better expression of myself. I mean, just immediately when you quit drinking, you just instantly, your face just, like 10 pounds falls off of your skin, just looks so much better, and actually that was something I was dealing with, where I had like this really bad psoriasis going on. And there I was about to go through all whatever medical treatments. And then all of a sudden it's just no, just quit drinking. That'll help it out a lot. Emily? It sounds like we froze up on here. Hold on just one. Just gonna get us. All right. I just paused this real quickly, but I actually was just looking here. I do kind of need to start wrapping this up a little bit, but just ultimately the benefits there. So real quickly, I see that you are in a married person's pageantry. So that's a
Yes.
special subset of this, kind of the
Yeah.
pageant, that's you have to be married to be a part of it, is that I get out of this,
Well,
or is it kind of meant to
so
be a mom's pageant, is kind of the way of looking at it?
well, some people are like, I know a girl who just won a married title and she's 23. She has no children yet. And I know women that are in their late 40s that they've got 4 kids and they've won titles. But I really was trying to find a way to get my message out there about sobriety, especially in the women. And I had a I'd always had this like dream of trying Miss America or Miss USA, but I grew up in rural Texas, didn't have a lot of funds, didn't have a lot of money, and that stuff requires money. And last year, my father-in-law, he passed away, and my husband, he just flat out asked me, "What is something crazy you'd want to try?" And I knew that they had like married pageants, but that's not for me. I used to drink a lot. I used to be obese. Like I don't want to, it's not for me. And so I just kind of blew him off. And about a month later, he was like, "No, what is something you really want to do?" And I told him, "Well, I've always wanted to try married pageants. Okay, let's find you one. Let's enter and let's go buy you a dress. Like, how hard can it be?" So I kind of Googled some pageants. I found one. I messaged the director. I entered. I had a great time. Obviously, did not win because there are people that they've been doing this a really long time. But I got some really good constructive feedback. Like, it's great that you've overcome alcohol, but what are you doing to move it forward? what kind of work are you doing in your community? So I ended up getting partnered with Shatterproof, which is a big nonprofit that actually deals with getting rid of addiction stigma, like on a whole, like across multi types of substance. And by the way, did you know alcohol is the most number one abused substance in the world? Did you know that?
Because it's socially acceptable.
Yeah,
It's,
number
you know,
one.
like, yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't shock me at all. And it's one of the hardest to kick,
yeah,
partially because of that reason, but then also literal the dependence on it, you know, like that was what got me into checking into a detox, is that with the way that I was going, I was actually scared of what would happen when I stopped.
yeah. And so I entered my first pageant at 37 years old. Had the time of my life. Got, like I said, got some feedback. Started volunteering. I was actually on their walk committee. I helped plan walks all across the country to raise awareness for substance abuse. And did another pageant, got second runner up, had a good time, and I'm actually doing one February 2nd here in Texas. But yeah, it's a good way to keep me, pushing myself in the gym, keeping myself accountable, and it really feels, God, I asked God if he'd help me, that I would help other people. And this might be a very unconventional way to help other people, but it's an attention grabber. It's also really fun. I mean, who doesn't like to get, girls, we love to get our hair done, we love to get our makeup done. And also, what I really like is it's showing my boys that mommy has a goal. Mommy is going after something she's really passionate about, because as women, especially after we have kids, and I work in insurance, it's a very black and white field, very dressed up. To go do something that is outside of a norm, it's different. And it's showing my boys, like, mom can set a goal. Mom is more than just my taxi driver. She's a multifaceted person.
Am I chef?
Yeah, a chef, payer of bills, driver to rock climbing. It kind of shows them that, yeah, my mom has other goals. She has interests. And as they get older and they become working professionals and parents, I want them to have goals, not just to make their entire self-worth around what their children are doing, which I think a lot of women especially do that. Like, Johnny hit, and we were talking about sports earlier, and I think so much why millennials are so fascinated with how their kids are doing in sports and their other activities, because they don't have anything going on their own lives, in their own personal lives. Their entire self-worth is wrapped up in those kids. So
Yes.
this is showing my boys that you can be a good parent, a good spouse, but you can have your own goals outside of that.
Well, and it's also the idea of that, like, and, earlier on you said something about being vain, and it's like, it's weird that we have to use such negative terminology to describe feeling good about yourself, like, there's the one thing where it's, if you're posting pictures out there to seek attention or to be a provocateur or something like that, it's another thing of like,
Right.
hey, like, I work hard for this, like, enjoy this, and this is also the idea too of that. It's like, like, I used to not be this. And it's kind of that, like, anyone that thinks that you can't do this, you can, kind of is the
Yeah.
way that I kind of look at this, of that, like, I find it funny in my life is that when I meet somebody that does not know me from my past life, they have a hard time understanding that I ever was that person. Whereas people who I was a part of my life during the phases of that life, they have a hard time understanding I'm who I am now, which is
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of the weird thing, but like kind of showing somebody that, you can get better on there. But, and yeah, I mean, that, again, there's nothing wrong with feeling good about yourself and being told that you do. And ultimately, it sounds like you do, which is the most important thing I always look at, is that setting things that have challenges to them, but then also have rewards that are worthwhile, and finding something that is not too daunting, but is not too, and, not, but also is equally rewarding. And that's kind of an ideal place to be, and that's kind of what I get out of this podcast of, it's like, it's nice to have something out there, and that, the challenge of getting this to reach somebody to help them is rewarding if it does, but there's a
Right.
challenge in even getting that to be getting that to happen. And I'm having fun doing it. And it sounds like you're having fun doing what you're
Oh,
doing.
yeah. Well, and I
And
know I've been on stages and I've told my story, and I've been on other podcasts, and the amount of messages I get where people are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that someone else had a problem too." Someone like you Like someone like me, like, yeah, someone like you has it all together. You have problems. Like we all have problems.
Right. And
Um, we all have problems, and this is just I made a promise, and I'm very particular with my promises. When the Holy Spirit asks you a question, are you done? Are you done putting poison in your body? Are you done being an idiot? And you say yes, you are done.
I,
And me doing the pageants and being on podcasts and giving speeches, that's a part of me being done, because so many people need help and they don't know where to go, and they don't have anyone to look at, because let's be honest, the only, I would call them, celebrity female that is sober is probably Jamie Lee Curtis, that's open about it. There's not a lot of role models out there, and I'm just
Kirstie
a
Alley is a
normal.
wonderful one.
Yeah,
Actually,
Christy Alley, yeah.
Kirstie Alley is the one that I've heard of. I mean, yeah, they are more on the guy thing because again, like to an
Mhm.
extent, a lot of guys partying was glamorized.
Right,
A little bit more where with the girls, I mean, the way that we were, treating the Tara Reeds of the world, as far as when
right.
she was through her partying phase,
I
but then,
mean,
Artie Lang, that's why we liked him, so it's
right.
kind of the,
It's
the
like
both
looking
sides.
back, the way we treated Lindsay Lohan, that poor child.
Oh,
Like,
I mean,
like
that's it.
looking back, like she was, addiction is an illness. It's a chronic disease. Like that girl needed help, and instead we sent her on Letterman, and like she got grilled to death. Like that's not right. And of course we wouldn't, it was what, 20ish years ago, 15 years ago. We wouldn't do that now, but the way we treated our women and our young girls that need help, and that's anything from alcohol to even like eating disorders, the way we treat them, it's gotten a lot better, but there's not a lot of role models on the other side. And I feel like I'm on the other side, and that's why I'm here.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, the idea of too is that, people, there's a little bit of a thing of that, I wear I don't want to say I wear my sobriety on my sleeve necessarily. It's not like but it's something that when I do meet somebody that becomes a part of my life now, I
Mm-hmm.
do kind of find a way to bring it up because it does kind of like, I was defined by being that person before. And it's just something that I'm just very proud of now. So it's kind of like the idea of like, I think I tell people that when you meet me now, you're meeting the best version of me is basically,
Yeah.
kind of the way I go for. And then ultimately, I mean, like, again, people, the idea that we all have some type of a problem is that we are not perfect. And some people have it wired. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just even have that kind of sometimes too, is that, we were kind of raised in this certain way of that, you don't show this negative, don't show this weakness out there and stuff like that. But it's like, that's really, I engage in even weaker behaviors just because I don't want to show it. So showing that, you have, made some mistakes makes it easier for someone else to admit that they've made a mistake, because ultimately that's one of the hardest things that people face in doing this is that they have to acknowledge they've been doing something
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And some people, are so stubborn that they'll just go to the grave, which if they continue their ways, it'll be a much sooner grave.
Right.
Just because they don't want to admit that they've been doing something wrong and they've been bartering with themselves. Emily, it's been a pleasure. We've ran a little bit longer than I intended. I actually have something that's going to be coming on right now. I'm going to be posting this out here in a couple days on Monday. I'll talk to you off air in just a second, but
Okay.
we can check out Emily on her journey with her pageants. I mean, I went on her website, emilycbonds.com. And if you want to chat with her yourself, or you do call all kinds of speaking arrangements, or just, if you could help me and Emily with our little journey of wanting to help somebody
Yes.
else out, reach out to her at all of her social medias, emilycbonds.com, or on Instagram at emilycbonds, or also at TikTok. So it was a pleasure getting to know you, hearing your story. And I'm glad that, you have that warm smile that you get to put on stage, but also set the wonderful example of that, hey, you could be finding yourself face down, covered in puke, and, then feeling like you're on top of the world just in a short period of time. If you
Mhm.
surrender your, willing to admit your mistakes, surrender however you have to do it. So, and anything that either Emily or I can do to help you out with that one. So everybody, thank you for tuning into the Scho-Zone. Emily, I'm going to let you go. I'll talk to you off air in just a second. But that was a wonderful discussion there. Again, the way that Emily lived her life and the way that I lived my life, you would not ever expect from the outsider's perspective that we have as much in common as we did, but we do. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Be sure to support Emily on her journey. Take it easy, everybody. Boom.